What are your thoughts on today's topic? So the topic is HR's dark matter. And what do you think is the importance of technological transformation?
Thanks for the question, Helene. Maybe to answer on the latter before the former regarding the topic. I think, from a technological topic perspective, obviously the hot topic is transformation of, or at least modernization of your product stack and introducing the smart technology components, AI, machine learning, etc. And I think it's very sort of relevant, and it is the hot topic because updating and modernizing your solutions and introducing these smart technology components is no longer optional. It's an absolute necessity. And I think it's really essential for, a sustainable core business strategy. And I think just as a reminder, that the technological transformation has to be intentional, right? Because success through technology doesn't just come to you. You need to go to it. And I think then just going back to the topic of the day, the theme, I think it's very relevant and it resonates with me. I think just to accompany that analogy of dark matter, the broader solar system aspect, right? So introducing the planets, which I see as your core sort of business solutions, i.e. Sage, Intacct, etc. And then you have the dark matter, which is these smart technology components, right? That some of these core businesses do lend out to the broader eco or the broader technology suite. But that dark matter then, that's the integrator that sits in and around these core solutions. And I think, it connects the dots. And you start getting insights into, areas that previously there was no knowledge. So I think it's the power of the collective. It's these smart technology components that maybe, that really sit alongside that core business solution.
Yeah. The next question I have for you is, we might have some audience members here today thinking, that's a great topic, it sounds very inspirational, but where do I start in this technological transformation process? Warren, you have a very interesting conceptualization that makes it very easy to understand what that journey might look like, and where we can almost plot ourselves on to see where we're at and what might be the next step for our business.
Sure, thanks. And maybe just to share this antiquated view, believe it or not, the image behind it, that's AI driven with my antiquated sort of PowerPoint skills. But just to maybe, before we get into the journey, I think, to Gerard's point, there's this idea around the smart technology, AI, machine learning, and I think, it's that hot topic. There's a lot of things that the businesses have probably done right up to date, right? And that's really settling down some of the functional operational items within that core business space. And going back to the previous point, that really does baseline the starting point for that journey, right? So it gives you a beautiful springboard to start integrating these solutions and start bringing them into play. And I think, for reasons, through fear, anxiety, it is about taking that leap. But the question is, you see this huge subject matter, this huge technology sort of area, and, it almost seems like this big elephant, and, the classic, saying around taking that elephant and eating it, or taking bites of it, smaller chunks of it, right? And I think that's where you've got to really look into the business and try and just understand the current state. So looking at your technology stack, looking at your processes, looking at the people. And, I think when you do that, some of these problem statements are going to jump out at you. Some of them might need a little bit more due diligence because you see something there. But ideally, what you are looking for is the quick wins, the smaller steps to get started. And it doesn't mean to say that you're not solving sort of meaningful problems in the business. If you're just realizing the value quicker, you might have a lower investment or a lower cost, a lower implementation time frame. And I think Gerard mentioned a couple of these items earlier, you know. For example, in a process, have a look at intercepting a process with a piece of automation. You don't have to go in and like reconfigure a process and try and automate it as a big bang. Have a look at that process, see if there's mundane tasks that are being carried out there that could be easily replaced. Have a look to see whether, you know, there's high volumes that are really bogging people down to process that information. And then there's other things like, you know, a query tool where, you know, your employee, from an engagement perspective, can request a policy piece of information. And the chatbots as well, you can simplify that. So you kind of sometimes just have to, I think, you know, look at a smaller intervention, and that really sort of sets the scene for that explore space. And then as these sort of tactical gap-filling solutions come into play, you're actually building on your smart technology suite. And I think when you get to that transformative phase, that's when there's momentum, there's trust in these solutions, the results are starting to show, and the confidence is being built into the business, you know, that these things actually do create value. The results are starting to happen. And effectively, you're starting to embed the solutions throughout the business, right? So it becomes a strategic mindset. You know, it's almost like when you encounter a problem, you know, it's tech-led thinking rather than, you know, if you want to call it human-led. So that sort of positions you into the transformation space. And some things like that, then, you know, as you go through the slope of enlightenment, so I actually didn't touch on that, really, you're starting to understand the power of this technology, and you're becoming more and more enlightened as to the power it holds. And I think when you're moving up that journey, you might, you know, the problems you want to solve get a little bit more complex. It might involve more time and effort. But it's an easier sell then, you know, because the confidence is there that we'll get the return on that solve. So that's where the confidence and the momentum's building. I think what really excites me about this pioneer phase, and I wouldn't say that's where it plateaus, it's a space where the business is really starting to latch on that power and the understanding of what that power could yield, right? So you're starting to look at it through a different lens because you're now educated, you really understand how different sets of data could, you know, strengthen a business case to, you know, make meaningful impacts on cost, you know, profit margins, being an employer of choice. And it doesn't stop there, right? So once you start creating, or once you start looking at meaningful, if you want to call it unique problems to your business, I think that's where you want to be eventually. Not to say that the journey up until date hasn't really yielded that magic. It's just to say that what you've probably done is brought yourself up to status quo. You've become relevant. And, you know, that's still a competitive advantage because a lot of businesses haven't started this journey. But where you're really going to yield rewards and competitive advantage and employer of choices when you reach that pioneer phase. And I think we're going to hear about it a little bit from James and our customer testimony a little bit later.